The locals in Northwest Arkansas are talking, and what they are saying about Kendra and Joseph Duggar's home, their parenting, their neighborhood, and the broader Duggar community is more disturbing than anything that has been reported publicly so far. And I want to walk you through everything that has come in from multiple sources covering multiple different families, because this story is so much bigger than one locked door and one arrest and one confession. This is a systemic crisis that has been building for years inside a closed community that has been allowed to operate without accountability for far too long. And it starts with Kendra. Sources who lived in the same neighborhood as Joseph and Kendra, because they were renting a home in a development built by Solomon Properties LLC that they moved into in the late summer or fall of 2024, are now talking, and what neighbors say Kendra told them is something that reframes everything about her situation. Because Kendra allegedly told people in the neighborhood that she never wanted to be a mom, that she only had children because she thought she had to, that she thought it was what she was supposed to do, and that statement coming from a neighbor who had direct conversations with Kendra is not gossip or speculation. It is a window into the inner world of a woman who was living a life she did not choose, raising children she did not want to have, in a home that was deteriorating around her, with a husband who had been controlling and isolating her from her own family. Neighbors described Kendra as a disconnected and disenchanted mother who seemed overwhelmed by her 4 children and did not want any more. And they noted that she would regularly send all 4 kids with Joseph to his shop, where he would work with all of them present, or Joseph would drop them at Kendra's parents' house for babysitting. And what was clear to people around them was that Kendra was not invested in spending time with her children and was not functioning as an engaged or present parent. A friend of Kendra's also shared that during her pregnancies, when she was dealing with hyperemesis gravidarum, severe pregnancy nausea, she would go to her parents' house and essentially leave the children for her siblings and parents to take care of, being very hands-off and expecting others to step in. And while some of that is understandable, given the severity of HG, the pattern that emerges across multiple sources is of a woman who was profoundly disconnected from her role as a mother, and who never had the space or the support to figure out who she actually was, or what she actually wanted from her life. Now, here is the thing about the house itself that explains so much about the condition it was in. Both the log cabin on the Duggar property, where Joseph and Kendra lived before this development, which was Mary Duggar's old house that was filled with mold and had a failed remediation attempt, and the new rental in the development both had mold problems. This is relevant because in Northwest Arkansas, the climate is subtropical in summer, and mold spreads rapidly in homes that have any kind of construction issues with windows, pipes, or ceiling. And the new development home apparently had issues with a window or a ceiling that allowed moisture in, and mold became a significant problem in that house. But the mold was not the only or even the primary reason that house was in the condition it was in when investigators arrived. Because what neighbors described goes well beyond a mold problem or even a general mess. The house smelled, and I am not talking about a smell you only notice if you get close. I am talking about an odor that some neighbors say they could detect from outside the house, and the reason for that smell, according to what sources shared, is deeply disturbing. Because when children are confined and cannot access a bathroom, there are bodily fluids that accumulate, and that is apparently what that smell was. And that detail alone tells you that what was happening in that house was not just a locked door situation, it was a level of neglect and confinement that was causing these children physical harm on a daily basis. Now here is something that reveals how deliberate the isolation of these children was. Joseph made the decision to stop going to their church, and after that decision was made, no family members or friends were allowed back into the house, meaning the locks were discovered, and within days Joseph pulled the entire family out of their social community and shut the door on anyone who might see what was happening inside, and Kendra went along with it, or was directed to go along with it, telling people they were tired of everyone telling them how to parent and they just needed to live their own life. And while that sounds like a reasonable boundary for a young married couple, the timing of it, immediately after the locks were discovered, tells you that it was not about healthy independence, it was about hiding what was happening to those children. The children were initially placed with a foster family in the same development, just within their own neighborhood, and what neighbors observed during those first weeks tells you everything about how those kids had been living. They were emotionally flat, showing what observers described as inappropriate affect, meaning they did not have the emotional reactions you would expect from children in a frightening and disruptive situation. Their social skills were significantly underdeveloped, and their play with each other was rough and forceful. Their educational delays were obvious and concerning. Their hygiene and self-care were significantly below what you would expect for their ages. And one neighbor noted that, rather than seeming sad or distressed about being removed from their parents, the children seemed almost relieved, almost happy, as though they were finally getting the attention and care that they had been starved of. And that observation is one of the most heartbreaking things in this entire story, because it means those children were so deprived of basic nurturing and attention that being placed with strangers in a foster home felt safer and better than being home with their own parents. And this brings me to something that the locals are now talking about very seriously: the question of whether Joy and Austin Forsyth are going to be next. Because multiple people in the community have noted that Joy and Austin use the same exterior door lock practices that Kendra and Joseph used. That Joy has been providing Kendra with homeschooling advice and guidance. That Kendra's children are horrifically delayed, which raises serious questions about what Joy's homeschooling approach produces in the children who are subjected to it. And that Joy and Austin already had a DCFS visit at their home related to a report of abuse and neglect, just within the past couple of weeks, and then within days of that visit, Joy and Austin packed up and went to Washington, D.C. without their children, which is something that people who know them say is extremely unusual because Joy and Austin almost never travel without their kids, and the combination of deleting every video from her YouTube channel, having Kendra stay at their house, receiving a DCFS visit, and then leaving town without their children has the local community asking very pointed questions about what is going on with Joy and Austin and whether their own household is about to come under the same kind of scrutiny that brought down Joseph and Kendra. The broader picture that is emerging from all of these local sources is that the Duggar family and the community of families around them are panicking, not just about Joseph and Kendra specifically, but about themselves, because many of them are using the same parenting practices, the same discipline methods, the same confinement approaches, and they know that if investigators start pulling on the thread of what was happening in Joseph and Kendra's home, it could lead directly to their own front doors. And that is the real reason the Duggar family has been so aggressively minimizing what Kendra and Joseph did and trying to frame it as a misunderstanding or an overreach by authorities. Because if what Kendra and Joseph did is normalized and acceptable, then what they are all doing is also normalized and acceptable. But if what Kendra and Joseph did is criminal, then they are all potentially criminal too. And Jim Bob Duggar knows that better than anyone. Now, I need to address something that was shared with me that goes to the very heart of how this community perpetuates itself and how it has been able to grow its reach. And this is about a deliberate and calculated grooming strategy that the Duggar-connected community has been using to bring new families into its orbit, specifically targeting families where children are vulnerable, where there is a parent who has passed away, where parents are divorcing, where children are being raised by grandparents, where there is financial instability or economic hardship, because those are the children who are most susceptible to the warmth and the community and the sense of belonging that a large, close-knit religious group can offer. And the Duggars have been intentionally going into churches and activities and friend groups to identify these vulnerable children and families and invite them in. And once they are in the process of indoctrination and dependency begins, and it becomes very hard to leave. And within this system, there is a marriage pipeline that is producing deeply troubled relationships, young people who are getting married not because they want to marry the person they are with, but because marriage is the only exit available to them from their parents' house, because you cannot leave your family in this world unless you are getting married. And so young people are marrying essentially anyone who is available just to get out. And then once they are married, they find themselves with a stranger they barely know, in a relationship that was orchestrated and controlled by their parents, with no real intimacy or genuine connection. And there is something even more heartbreaking in what sources have shared. Some of the people getting married in this community are gay, and they know they are gay, and they are getting married to someone of the opposite gender as the only way they can see to escape their parents' home. Because being gay in this world is not an option, it is not acknowledged, It is not permitted. And so people who know who they are hiding it and marrying someone they are not attracted to and building a life around a lie because the alternative, being openly gay in this community, is not survivable socially or emotionally. And all of these young people, the disconnected mothers who never wanted children, the fathers who were never taught how to be present and nurturing, the wives who married strangers just to get out, the husbands who are hiding who they are, they were all produced by a system that Jim Bob Duggar has been building and expanding and protecting for decades. A system that takes in vulnerable people and processes them into compliant followers who replicate the same patterns generation after generation, and the children who are coming out of this system, like Joseph and Kendra's 4 kids, sitting in a foster home in the same neighborhood where they grew up, finally getting the attention they were starved for, are the most visible and heartbreaking evidence of what that system ultimately produces when it is left unchecked. And the local community in Northwest Arkansas is watching all of this, and they are disturbed, and they are talking, and more of them are coming forward every single day. And Jim Bob Duggar's worst nightmare is not just one person with a platform. It is an entire community that has finally decided it has seen enough.